Okay, last time we continued with chapter 5 of Division E entitled Motion and the Chakras, in which DK lists the centers and which we explored both visually and through Ledbetter's texts. We then used this statement on the numerical makeup of the two head chakras, quote, "This makes a total of 1,068 petals and the two head centers, making the one center, or 356 triplicities. All these figures have an occult significance." We began, use this statement to begin a mini tutorial on sacred numerology using this passage from Rays and Initiations, which reveals the meaning of the numerical equivalents of the letters that make up the name Shambhala. Though DK references sacred numerology often, in this passage, he presents a revelatory exegesis on the subject. For not only are we given a new understanding of the meanings of number, we are also given a template by which to explore other names and other numerical references. So far, we've learned that the 9 letters of Shambhala represent initiation, whose purpose is to, quote, admit mankind into the reality, into realization of and identification with the will or purpose of deity. We then learned that the number 24, the sum total of the numbers making up the word Shambhala, reduces to 6, which DK tells us is, quote, the number of form or of manifestation, which is the agent or medium through which this realization comes and by which the consciousness is unfolded, so that it can become the foundation of the higher processes, the higher process being initiation. We then learned that 6 also represents the driving force of idealism, which, quote, makes mankind move forward upon the path and in response to the vision and press upward towards the light. And this takes us up to where we left off last time. So, continuing with our tutorial on sacred numerology, DK takes us further into the meaning of the number 24. So could we get a reader, please?
Gordon, you want to read?
Okay. The number 24 is of deep interest, expressing as it does the double 12, the greater and the lesser zodiac. Just as the number 6 expresses space, so the number 24 expresses time and is the key to the great cycle of manifestation. It is a clue to all cyclic appearance and incarnation. Its 2 figures define the method of evolution. 2 equals the quality of love, wisdom, working under the law of attraction and drawing man from one point of attainment to another, whilst 4 indicates the technique of conflict and achieving of harmony through that conflict. 4 is also the number of the human hierarchy, and 2 is the number of the spiritual hierarchy. Technically speaking, until the 3rd initiation, the initiate is occupied with a relationship of the 2 and the 4. These, when placed side by side, denote relation. And when placed the one above the other, the initiate passes from the 4 into the 2.
Thank you. Okay, so first up, the number 24 is of deep interest, expressing, as it does, the double 12, the greater and the lesser zodiac. Just as the number 6 expresses space, so the number 24 expresses time and is the key to the great cycle of manifestation. It is the clue to all cyclic appearance or incarnation. So, the number 24 expresses time, and the number 6, which is the sum of 2 plus 4, equals space, suggesting that both time and space are inherent aspects of Shambhala, which stands on the cusp between the lower realms ruled by time and space and the limitless, timeless realms of cosmos. The fact that 2 plus 4 equals 6 also suggests the interchangeability between time and space. In fact, DK seems to hint that since 24 is, quote, the key to the great cycle of manifestation, Shambhala, the planetary exponent of that number, plays a determining role in these cycles of manifestation. As to the lesser and greater zodiacs, the lesser zodiac spans a period of about 25,000 years, with each sign taking about 2,160 years to elapse. As you know, we're currently on the cusp between Pisces and Aquarius, 2 of the 12 signs that make up a lesser zodiac. The greater zodiac spans a period of about 300,000 years, with each sign taking around 25,000 years to pass. This figure is determined by the precession of the equinoxes, with one pass around the circle, here illustrated in yellow, equaling one sign of the greater zodiac. And finally, as mentioned before, when added together, the 2 and 4 of 24, which expresses time, become the 6 of space. Space and time being 2 of the main players in Einstein's theory of special and general relativity, which together prove that time and space are not separate and fixed entities, but rather interrelated and dynamic aspects of a single phenomenon, which Einstein called space-time. Interestingly, Einstein's theory of general relativity was published just 10 years before a treatise on cosmic fire. Okay, and next, its 2 figures define the method of evolution. 2 equals the quality of love wisdom, working under the law of attraction and drawing man from one point of attainment to another, whilst 4 indicates the technique of conflict and the achieving of harmony through that conflict. So DK here gives us a second meaning of the 2 and 4 of Shambhala, this time from a qualitative perspective. That is, the law of attraction, the second law working in accord with the second ray, drawing humanity from one point of attainment to the next by means of rays 4 power to resolve conflict. Together, these 2 rays become the way that humanity on the evolutionary path experiences time represented by Shambhala. Next, 4 is also the number of the human hierarchy, and 2 is the number of the spiritual hierarchy. So now we have a third factor. We might conclude from this statement that through the dynamic action of rays 4 and 2, which condition the experience of time and space on the evolutionary path, the human kingdom gradually moves from the 4th to the 2nd hierarchy. And all of this is overshadowed by the purpose of Shambhala. By the way, it's always more fun when you have thoughts, questions, answers. So just raise your hand if you have any ideas about this. Okay. This idea is confirmed by DK's final statement. Technically speaking, until the third initiation, the initiate is occupied with the relationship of the 2 and the 4. These, when placed side by side, connote relation, and when placed the one above the other, the initiate passes from the 4 into the 2. Ruled by group consciousness, soul pursuit is inherently relational. With fourth ray harmony, the goal of merging into the second principle of deity. But at the third initiation, and even more so at the fourth, the relational goals conceived and realized by striving towards harmony give way under the synthetic influence of the monad to new goals described in terms of identification. In this way, evolutionary movement spirals upward to the second or monadic plane. Thoughts or questions? Okay. Next up, can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Helios. You want to read?
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay. So I'm reading this passage that's next to this illustration, correct?
that's right.
Thank you. Needless to say, there is much more to say and in these figures, but the above will suffice to show the satisfactory nature of esoteric numerology, not numerology as understood today. I would have you note that the sounds which compose the word Shambhala are predominantly along the line of will or power or of first ray energy. Of the 9 letters, 6 are on the first ray line of force. 1 dot 1 dot 1 dot 3 dot 3 dot 1 spirit and matter, will and intelligence. 2 of them are along the second line of force, 4 and 2. The number 8 inaugurates ever a new cycle, following after number 7, which is that of a relative perfection. It is the number of the Christ consciousness, just as 7 is the number of man. 8 is the number of the hierarchy, and 9 is the number of initiation or of Shambhala. Forget not that, from the angle of the hierarchy, the third initiation is regarded as the first major initiation.
Thank you. Okay, first, needless to say, there is much more to say anent these figures, but the above will suffice to show the satisfactory nature of esoteric numerology, not numerology as understood today. So there are 2 lines of thought being simultaneously presented in the passages we've been studying. First, teachings on the meanings of the numbers as they relate to Shambhala. And second, certain methods, here sanctioned by DK, that the student might pursue in order to determine the meaning of a name through analysis of the number that makes up that name. This latter revelation presents a non-comprehensive but useful skill set on numerology. In fact, it is through this example analysis of the word Shambhala that DK legitimizes numerology, or as he says, shows the satisfactory nature of esoteric numerology. Next, I would have you note that the sounds which compose the word Shambhala are predominantly along the line of will or power or of first ray energy. So here DK expands his exposition on numerology to include not only the written letters of Shambhala, but also the energy produced through the sounding of these letters. Next. Of the 9 letters, 6 are on the first ray line of force, 111331, spirit and matter, will and intelligence. Interestingly, DK includes the number of matter, 3, as one of the sounds expressive of the first ray, thus suggesting that, as before mentioned, it is by means of the world of form that the purpose of deity is fulfilled. And then in this way, they become inextricably bound. From a certain perspective, 1 and 3 represent the sum total, with the second principle a later development born from the 1 and 3, or spirit and matter, and whose purpose is to reunite matter with spirit on the return path. Can we get a rater, please? Mikhail, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I just had to go to the door. Janet, you want to read?
Through the intuition, some of the plans and purposes working out through the manifested, created worlds are brought to his attention, and he is shown in a way he and the rest of humanity can cooperate and hasten the divine purpose. Through the intuition, the laws of the spiritual life, which are the laws governing God himself, conditioning Shambhala, and the guiding the hierarchy, are brought to his notice progressively, and as he moves, capable of appreciating them and working with them.
Thank you. Okay. Next, 2 of them, the numbers representing Shambhala, are along the second line of force, 4 and 2. So the 2 and 4 are particularly important because they mirror the 24 of the sum total, indicating that though 2/3 of the letter sounds composing the name Shambhala are expressive of the first ray, you can see that up here, 2/3 of the numbers are expressive of the first ray. This first ray expression is nonetheless taking place in a second ray solar system. Said another way, a comparison of the numbers within the name Shambhala with the numbers present in the sum total of that name suggests that the inherent first ray energy of the planetary head center, which is Shambhala, is expressed in service to 1, a second ray solar system, and 2, the 4th globe, or the 4th round, or the 4th chain, or the 4th scheme, which is our Earth. Therefore, you have the 2 of the solar system and the 4 of all the cycles that we are now involved in. Any thoughts or questions? Anyone? Yes, James.
The last slide, which talked about rules governing God, and that brought up the whole thing that I used to think the monad was the highest level, but then I've seen things above that. So that's just a whole fascinating question that I know nothing about.
Yeah, so the monad in its as a collective is Shambhala, is the consciousness of Shambhala. The separated monad, which is an oxymoron, just like a separated soul is, because these are group-oriented levels of consciousness. In its group formation, is expressive through Shambhala. Anyone else? Okay, let's see. So next up, the number 8 inaugurates ever a new cycle, following after the number 7, which is that of a relative perfection. So we can hear this move from 7 to 8 by means of the octave, the 8th note, which is illustrated on the right, exactly doubles the frequency of the first note or tonic. We can also see it graphically in the 2 circles that make up the numeral 8, which, like the Christ principle, which is also expressive of this number, circulates its energy into its lower expression. The relative perfection of the number 7 can be illustrated in the progression of subraces, root races, globes, rounds, and chains, which have a direct relation to the notes of the major scale. In each of these cycles, the 7th iteration, as shown here, marks a relative point of perfection, the goal of mankind. That's why DK gives 7, the number 7, and assigns it to humanity, because he's perfected, she is perfected at this level, at this stage. So it's relative point of perfection of the purpose of that particular cycle. A gain in quality, which is then carried into and forms the qualitative basis of the next cycle. The first iteration of that next cycle demonstrates through both the number 1 and the number 8. It is first in relation to the new group of 7 that follow it, and 8th in relation to the previous cycle. Any thoughts or questions about this? The gains made in earlier cycles are always brought forward. They become, they go below the threshold and qualitatively condition the nature of the next cycle. Okay, next, it is the number of the Christ consciousness. We're talking about 8 here, just as 7 is the number of man. 7 is the number of man in this context. That is to say, when a disciple perfectly expresses him or herself in the 3 worlds of human endeavor as a result of his or her participation in the 7 root races, 7 globes, etc., he or she is ushered into a new kingdom, the kingdom of souls, and a new cycle of being, expressive of Christ consciousness, begins. In this way, the 7 becomes the 8. In other contexts, the number of man is 5. And the perfected man becomes 10, but it's in a different relational context. Next, 8 is the number of the hierarchy. This is true because the hierarchy is expressive of Christ consciousness and overseen by the Christ, whose number is 8. Again, we have a relationship between the 7 of humanity and the 8 of the hierarchy, with the latter representing a higher octave of the former. So in terms of how numerology works, we are beginning to see that different numbers can be used to emphasize different lines of development for the same players. For example, 7 and 8, representing humanity and hierarchy, are here used, focuses on cyclic progression, with the 7 of perfection becoming the 8 of the new cycle. But you may remember that DK earlier describes the same movement from humanity to hierarchy as 4 moving to 2. The focus of, in this case, being the fact that, quote, 4 is the number of the human hierarchy and 2 is the number of the spiritual hierarchy. The word number here meaning the intrinsic defining quality. Same players using different numbers to emphasize a different relationship. Okay? It's tricky stuff. It takes a while to get a sense of this. Any thoughts or questions to this point? I see a hand. Yes, Tom.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was just thinking in a new way the relationship between the second and the fourth ray, and it came to my mind that the second ray would be the puller, the attraction from the lower point and the higher point. And when you are in that process, then in the middle you are in the fourth ray in conflict, because you are in tension between those upper and lower points. And when the second ray kind of grows stronger, the more harmonious you would be. So
when the higher aspect of the second ray becomes more dominant,
the pull of the higher point of evolution becomes stronger, then you turn into the second ray.
I really like that, Tom. I hadn't thought of that before. That because the second ray can take you into the form aspect. For instance, the second Jupiter as the exoteric ruler of Pisces actually expands one into the quote unquote waters of incarnated life. That's very much a second ray influence. It's expansive, it's attractive, it merges one's consciousness into whatever is appropriate for that time. And then, of course, we know that on the higher levels, the second ray is the active quality of the soul and of the solar angels. And that when you overcome that lower pole, you are then drawn towards another second ray quality, right? And as you pointed out, Tom, and I think that's really good, that in a way the fourth ray defines this shift from one pole, the law of attraction demonstrating, and the law of attraction, by the way, is the second law of attraction demonstrating in the world of substance, to the law of attraction demonstrating as the potency of the soul, drawing you in towards its quality. Yeah, real good point.
Yeah, and I what you said about Jupiter, I think that also the law of the second ray functions as an attractive force on different levels. But from the perspective of evolution, it works pulling upwards, and from the point of involution, then it attracts forms. So it's quite logical in that context too.
Right. In humanity being stuck right in the middle right now, we're just one root race beyond dead center, is very much conditioned by both these attractions, you could say, the pull into material relationship and the pull into solar relationship. Both are it's like a lunar solar balance right now that has really, really brought the fourth ray to the fore. Also the fact that we're in the, on the fourth round, fourth globe, fourth chain on the fourth scheme accentuates that potency of the fourth ray, which is the time of choice, a time of great conflict towards, with the end result being harmony. And that's a perceived result, but it's not one that's it's one that only incrementally unfolds. You get a sense of harmony in one aspect, only then to engage in another level of conflict, fourth ray conflict, in order to achieve yet another level of harmony. Drawn on always by this second ray. So really good thoughts there, Tom. Thank you. Any other thoughts or questions about this? So again, I'll restate my point here, which is that the numbers used are not necessarily absolute in terms of their identification with a certain subject. Like for instance, the number of humanity can change radically depending on the context, on what is being illustrated, what's being described. So the 7 and 8 are very much about the cycles. And in that case, when we're talking about the cyclic movement, then the number of humanity becomes 7, right? And the number of hierarchy becomes 8. Okay, so next, and 9 is the number of initiation or of Shambhala. DK tells us in Telepathy and the Etheric Vehicle that the purpose of initiation is to align the initiate with Shambhala. That's why they have the same number. 9 is both the number of Shambhala and of initiation. Quote, the work done through the processes of initiation is intended to fit disciples and initiates to receive impression from Shambhala. That's its purpose. The initiate is essentially a blend of scientific and religious training. He has been reoriented to certain phases of divine existence, which are not yet recognized by the average human being. Now, when we add the 9 of initiation to the 7 of humanity and the 8 of hierarchy, we have a 7, 8, 9 numerical progression. Interestingly, 7 plus 8 plus 9 also equals 24, the number of Shambhala. Thus, we might conclude that the numbers that represent humanity plus the number that represents hierarchy plus the number that represents the method for progressing from humanity to hierarchy, which is initiation, add to the number of Shambhala. Finally, forget not that from the angle of the hierarchy, the third initiation is regarded as the first major initiation. He says this often throughout the works, throughout the blue books, he mentions this. And I think DK inserts this statement in this passage on the meaning of Shambhala because the third is the first initiation where the initiate becomes conscious of the monad, which has its origin in Shambhala, and during which Sanat Kumara, who stands at the center of Shambhala, presides. DK concludes this unique exegesis on numerology by saying, these preliminary remarks are intended to convey much esoteric information to those who realize that number gives the clue to the form and purpose of the life which the form veils. So we might ask, what does DK mean by clue to the form? He might be referring to the numerical and geometrical qualities of the deva groups that build the form, as well as the numerical and geometrical aspects of the substance of the form manipulated by these devas. Intrinsic to both these are the tone and color that naturally arises through the creative expression of the determining number. Does that make sense? Form is conditioned by number, very much so. You know, the substance of the astral plane has a completely different numerical makeup than, say, the substance of the physical plane or the mental plane. And that is brought about by the overarching devas who originally developed these planes, and by the little elemental lives, also conditioned by number, that make up the literal substance of those planes. That's why a thought form has a completely different conditioning numerological reality than a feeling, right? Any thoughts or questions? Okay, number also gives the clue, we're here told, to the purpose of the life which the form veils. A purpose which we might assume is best served by an aligned numerical quality, the aligned numerical quality of the form, right? So they're going to be in concert. In other words, the purpose is going to draw to itself an appropriate form that is numerically expressive of that purpose. So how does number determine the purpose of the indweller? DK makes it clear that ray quality plays a defining role. For example, an indwelling life conditioned by the second ray will attract a form which is best able to express the purpose of the number 2, the second principle, the law of attraction, and the second ray. Okay? Alrighty then, back to the main text. Our mini tutorial on esoteric numerology was based on the statement, all these figures have an occult significance. We've determined that the 1,068 petals and the 2 head centers, which adds to 24, is related to the numerical value of the word Shambhala, which also adds to 24, and that possibly this relationship is at least in part due to the fact that they both represent head centers. One of the individual, that's this top one, the other of the planetary head center, right? In the tutorial, we discovered that the number 24 is expressive of time, which DK relates to the period of the greater and lesser zodiacs. Since Shambhala represents the spiritual north pole of our planet, it's easy to see a relationship between it and the double zodiac, which our planet's axis marks through the precession of the equinoxes. You see the connection? We also learned that the 7 of humanity and the 8 of hierarchy added to the 9 of initiation also gives 24, suggesting that from a synthetic perspective, Shambhala represents the cycle of evolution that leads humanity into monadic awareness, which is expressed through the 5th kingdom in nature. So all these have a deep intrinsic relationship, right? And we could, there's many more connections to be found if we, went further into this. But the point being that Shambhala is the synthetic one reality, you could say, that the expression of deity and expresses itself through the lesser head centers, and it expresses itself through humanity, hierarchy, and 9 is the number also of Shambhala as well as of initiation. So it's all of a synthetic piece. But what about DK's reference to 356 triplicities? It's been a while since we read this statement. I think it was the beginning of last webinar. Why does he break 1068 into 3 parts? In the next paragraph, DK hints that this triplicity references a convergence of the influence of the 3 aspects, 3 plus 5 plus 6. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me say that again. DK hints that this triplicity references a convergence of the influence of the 3 aspects. So 3 plus 5 plus 6 equals 14, which further reduces to 5. 14 is the sum of the first 5 numbers that define pi, which represents the diameter, universal symbol for manifestation in relation to the circle. The diameter is 1 in relation to the circle, which is 3.1.41415. The circle is the universal symbol of the spirit aspect, and the diameter is the universal symbol of manifestation. So you have in this 31415, which adds to 14, something similar to this 356 trip of the 1/3 of the head center. It's a little bit opaque, a little bit occult. You know, it's like he's, let's go back to that passage. It's like he's giving us food for further development, because he doesn't develop this at all, and it's not nearly as easily related to like all the 24s that result through the addition of the different head centers. But he's suggesting the very fact that he mentions it suggests that there is something here to be developed. So the only thing I could find is that 356 add to 14, which relates to the which suggests the relationship between the form aspect represented by the diameter and the circle. There are, of course, other meanings of the number 356, but until the intuition is more fully developed, or DK tells us, we can only ponder and surmise, try to develop these numbers. All right, next up. Just as the monad is the sum total of all the 3 aspects and of the 7 principles of man, so the head center, a replica of this, has within its sphere of influence 7 other centers with itself for synthesis. So here we learned that the head center is a kind of energetic outpost for the influence of the monad in the 3 worlds of human endeavor, and that it is, just like the monad, a synthesis of the 3 aspects. Hence, DK dividing of the head center petals into 3 divisions. And finally, these 7 centers are likewise divided into the 3 major and the 4 minor centers, with their union and consummation seen in the gorgeous center surmounting and enveloping them all. We learned earlier that the 3 major centers, the head, the heart, and the throat centers, represent the 3 aspects of the monad. In this context, the 4 minor centers represent the lower quaternary. Okay. Next up, could we get a reader, please? Any thoughts or questions so far? Yes, James.
Sorry, what were the 3 major centers?
Head, heart, and throat. It's 3 aspects. Head representing the first aspect, the heart representing the second, and the throat representing active intelligence. And that they're kind of outposts of the monad within the human form. And when developed, they relate to both the spiritual triad and the monad via the spiritual triad. Okay? Anyone else? Okay. Next up, can we get a reader?
Kira, you want to read?
Hi.
Hi, Kira.
There are also three physical centers called A, the alto major center, B, the pineal gland, C, the pituitary body, with 4 lesser centers. These 4 lesser centers are blended in that center, which we call the alto major center, and need not concern us. I would here also point out that there is a close connection, A, between the alto major center and the throat center, B, between the heart center and the pituitary body, C, between the head center and the pineal gland.
Okay, thank you. So first, there are also 3 physical centers called A, the alto major center, B, the pineal gland, and C, the pituitary body. These are the 3 highest physical centers. Pineal and pituitary are dense physical glands recognized by medical science, whereas because the alto major exists only in etheric matter, it is not recognized by science. Every source I found describes it as a chakra. For example, quote, the alto major center is in proximity to the atlas bone, or C1, at the top of the spine. It is part of the subtle energy biofield and has a powerful link to the cerebellum, medulla oblongata, spine, and vagus nerve. It is considered to be a gateway to higher consciousness and a nexus of body, mind, spirit connection. Earlier in TCF, we read the following passage. Could we get a reader, please?
Kirsten, you want to read?
Yes. The other fire, or matter, the dual fire, is attracted upward and merges with a fire mind through a junction affected at the alto major center. This center is situated at the base of the skull, and there is a slight gap between the center and the point at which the fires of matter issue from the spinal channel. Part of the work the man who is developing thought power has to do is to build a temporary channel in etheric matter to bridge the gap. This channel is a reflection in physical matter of the antaskarana.
Thank you. Thoughts or questions? Okay. Next. Yes, James.
Can you just say a little bit about the etheric? I just recently realized it relates, I guess, to the ether, or to the field that we're learning about throughout, that permeates all of space and is life, the life force. But just a little something to kind of,
Sure.
you know, I understand the physical, emotional, and mental planes. Is the etheric related to the astral and emotional plane?
No, it's related to, well, first of all 3 of those levels, I almost wanted to go over to another program, but it doesn't work in the way this is configured. Anyway, you have etheric as the etheric subplanes on all three planes, in fact, all the planes, but in terms of the human constitution, we have the highest four subplanes of the mental plane are etheric, mental etheric. They're always the least substantive. The etheric, the four highest subplanes of the astral are also etheric. But what's generally called the etheric or etheric physical plane is what normally people think of as etheric, which are the highest four subplanes of the physical plane. The ones below that are the airy, watery, and dense physical, which are known by science, whereas the etheric subplanes are not, even though there's some thought that electricity is a known substance that actually manifests on etheric levels. It's another question. But anyway, the etheric body is an energetic body that literally the physical body is patterned on. So the etheric body is actually the true physical body, and the dense physical, you could say, forms as a result of the etheric. It literally clings to it, atom per atom, to the etheric body. The etheric energy system, which are called chakras, is actually a kind of misnomer, as we've discovered recently in TCF, that even though the etheric body has a series of webs that separate the physical locality of the centers themselves are made up of monadic force that is transmitted to us from the ego. So it's not the actual fiery substance of these etheric chakras. Of these chakras are not made of etheric matter, but they work on etheric matter, and they're held in place, you could say, by the etheric body. So that's a quick thumbnails of the nature of the etheric. The prana, which comes to us from a number of sources, basically from the solar angels and from contact with the violet devas of the earth, makes actually is constantly rejuvenating our physical body via the etheric, right? It's the source of our vitality. And there's always a strong connection between the etheric vehicle and vitality. Hope that helps. Yes, Nisa.
I've been listening to telepathy when I drive, so I don't know exactly where it is in there, but I do know that he says something about that the lower chakras, and he was talking about the etheric body, and that the lower chakras are planetary, and that the upper chakras are solar etheric substance. Where does that all fit in?
Well, the inherent energy of the quote unquote lower chakras are form defining, form building, and form maintaining. For instance, obviously the sacral chakra is all about creativity at the form level. This is how we are able to propagate, right? The root chakra is the source of the energy of physical substance itself, called the latent fire, right? And then the spleen is the means by which the pranic triangle, which is that source of our vitality, the spleen actually directs it into our physical vehicle, right? So that's the nature of the lower chakras. Also, the You have the solar plexus, which is the great meeting grounds and synthesizing agency for all the lower chakras. But it's also, you know, the solar plexus has 2 points in it. One is oriented downwards towards the maintenance of the vehicle, and the other one upwards towards that great transformation or transition to the heart center. And so in that way, there is an aspect of the solar plexus that relates to the solar chakras, which are, of course, the higher chakras. And they're energizing rather than being form maintaining, allow us to evolve and transcend our physical identification and move into soul identification. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anybody else? Okay. Oh, I see a hand. Helios voice.
Thank you. I just would like humbly to share that the 888, 888 that I call, I met in the gematria. Gematria was the system of pardon my English, in ancient time when there was a persecution of Christianity, high priests, especially those who are in the line of Melchizedek, who obviously I believe now, looking at all this material, that they were somewhat initiated in some mysteries probably, but they coded in the sacred scripts when they were describing either Christ or events around the Christ, they simply put 888 in gematria. And I am just absolutely smitten by that because the meaning that I learned today of 888, Christ consciousness, in a inauguration of new cycle and number of hierarchy altogether, it's very very deep and very high, and it's like amazing to learn that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for bringing that up. That's really interesting. So you know, you could say by the 888, you have the Christ within, you have the level of the solar angel, and you have the actual Christ. Or you could bring the first two together, the solar angel and the Christ within. Then you have the Christ of the hierarchy, and then you have the cosmic Christ. In either case, you know, you have this what we know to be a triple exposition of the Christ influence. You know, for instance, we know that Sirius is to our solar logos in a Christ-like position. That is, it's exemplifies that second aspect. And so, you know, also you think of if you take 3 8s and stack them on each other, you have 6 cycles.
You have 24. 8 by 3, 24.
Oh, if you do that, yeah, you could
Yeah.
do that. But I mean, just literal and the physical, visual, you know, stacking up of 3 8s on top of each other, you have a sine wave. It's very much like the caduceus, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You know, in fact, I'm looking at a caduceus right now that is, you know, I'll pull it up, see if I can, you know, here it is. And you can see that it's like 3 8s, you know, intertwined that take you up. So it's, you know, an 8 circulates energy between 2 centers. You know, we identify it with the Christ because it's the soul aspect that circulates its energy down into the personality aspect, you know, the soul entrapped in matter, you know. But this is you could say it's the source of spiralic motion, that it also is connected to that higher octave by which it receives energy, you know. So yeah, it's really fascinating.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up. Yes, James.
You can file this away for some other time because this really feels off topic, but I'm very curious about the correlation between the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, and Father, Mother, Son, because I always feel like there's some connection. But like I say, I'm fine if you don't go into it now.
Well, I'll just make a quick comment. They represents the three aspects. The Father is always the aspect of deity, the Mother, the aspect of form, and the Son, that which is brought into being as a result of the coming together of those two aspects. This is demonstrated by the vesica pisces, which are two circles that overlap, and you have that center portion that looks like an almond, which is why in Italian it's called a mandorla. In short, the Christ is shown standing within the mandorla. So it represents the second principle, which connects the realm of deity to the realm of the substantive world, which is the mother. Okay, anyone else? Okay. So I was talking about the idea of the alta major here shown, and it's this purely etheric center that DK relates to the pineal gland, which stands at the center of the head. It's actually in the middle, and the pituitary body, which is often related to the heart center. Okay, earlier in TCF, we read the following passage. This is just more on these glands. Can we get a reader, please?
Magda, do you want to read?
Hi. His
Hi.
three higher physical centers, the pineal gland, the pituitary body, and the alta major center, are affected, and man becomes physically aware in the physical brain of the higher influences, happenings, and powers. According to the ray concerned, so is the center affected. The force of the lunar lord, which has succeeded in keeping these three organs quiescent, is superseded, and the solar angel pour in their energy. When the Antashkarana is in process of utilization, the Alta Major Center is likewise employed, and the three physical head centers begin to work as a unit, thus forming a kind of triangle. By the time the third initiation is reached, this triangle is fully awakened and the fire or energy is circulated freely. When the Alta Major Center, the synthesis of what might be called nervous energy, is awake, it becomes possible for him to materialize and activate the desired form which, through attractive energy, he is in process of constructing.
Okay, thank you. So, we've read about the fiery triangles. We went through the whole section on the raising of the Kundalini and how these different fiery triangles are formed. Well, the last one of these, the triangle in the head, is formed between these three centers, I'm sorry. And when those merge with the lower fires, which are represented by the pranic triangle and the triangle of inherent or dense physical fire that has its source in the base of the spine. When those three triangles are brought together, then that draws down the fire of spirit. And this happens at third, fourth initiation. Okay. Just to put it in some context to what we've already studied. Yes, James.
So part of the purpose of initiations, and there being many, is to protect us from getting too much energy too soon.
Oh, well, that's kind of looking at it backwards. The reason that there are successive initiations is because growth is inherently successive. And so we also grow in our spiritual body through the successive initiations. And you'll see, we're going to be getting into this. He literally describes the triangles involved at each level of consciousness. And we're going to be getting into that in a minute. Okay, next up. So he says there are also 3 physical centers called ultimate major pineal gland, pituitary body, with 4 lesser centers. These 4 lesser centers are blended in that center, which we call the ultimate major center, and need not concern us. Okay, the only other reference in the blue books concerning these 4 lesser physical centers, not to be confused with the lower chakras, is on the next page in TCF, where DK confirms the fact that the ultimate major synthesizes the 4 lesser centers and that they become active along with the heart and throat centers in the disciple who is partially controlled by the ego. Well, we're getting slightly ahead of ourselves here. In addition, the wording of C, the head, that is the 4 lesser centers and their synthesis, the Alta center, suggests that when synthesized, the Alta major center, by the Alta major center, these 5 now combined centers become the head center expression for a disciple who is partially controlled by the ego. Okay? It will be coming back to this because I jumped a page just to illustrate what the 4 lesser centers are about. So next, I would here also point out that there is a close connection, A, between the ultimate major center and the throat center, between the heart center and the pituitary body, between the head center and the pineal gland. We learned much later in TCF that the chakras always stand in a causal relationship to the activity of physical centers. That in fact, these physical centers or glands begin to function as a result of the awakening of their related centers. Quote, as the major head center awakens, the pineal gland begins to function. As the heart center becomes fully active, the pituitary body enters into activity. As the throat center assumes its right place in the process of evolution, the ultimate major center vibrates adequately. Okay. I think it's an important thing to keep in mind. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Lisa.
Sorry, my fingers weren't working.
Sorry.
It would repay the student to contemplate the interesting succession of triangles that are to be found and the way in which they must be linked by the progression of the fire before that fire can perfectly vivify them and thence pass on to the other transmutations. We might enumerate some of these triangles, bearing always in mind that according to the ray, so will proceed the geometric rising of the fire, and according to the ray, so will the points be touched in ordered sequence. Herein lies one of the secrets of initiation, and herein is found some of the dangers entailed in a too quick publication of information concerning the rays.
Thank you, Nisa. So first, it would repay the student to contemplate the interesting succession of triangles that are to be found and the way in which they must be linked by the progression of the fire before that fire can perfectly vivify them, and thence pass on to other transmutations. There's a lot in this sentence. The triangles that we studied so far in TCF have to do with the three fires of Kundalini, the latent and pranic fires of matter, the fires of mind, and the fire of spirit, which is invoked through the blending of the lesser fires. This is what DK is referring to when he says the progression of the fire. It's a very specific progression. It is, we're here told, this Kundalini fire that links, activates, and vivifies the triangles that he is about to list. Okay. Next up, we might enumerate some of these triangles, bearing always in mind that according to the ray, so will proceed the geometric rising of the fire. And according to the ray, so will the points be touched in ordered sequence. We touched on the concept of the geometric rising of the fire during our study of the raising of the Kundalini, though no specifics are allowed to be given out. But we do know that there is a triangle of latent fire at the base of the spine, a triangle of pranic fire that circulates between a point between the shoulder blades, a point just above the solar plexus, and the spleen. And there are fires of mind that circulate between the pineal, the pituitary, and the alta major centers. The geometric configurations caused by the direction of energy flow between these triangles and the 7 major centers is, we're here told, determined by the ray configuration of the disciple. It is probably the 3 major monadic rays that are in play here, but no further info on this subject is given anywhere that I could find. Next, herein lies one of the secrets of initiation, and herein is found some of the dangers entailed in 2 quick publication of information concerning the rays. The initiating point of a triangle, the direction of energy flow, and how and where the fire transfers from one triangle to the next, all determined by the initiate's ray makeup, is necessarily guarded info. Why? Well, if it was given out, one could meditate on a specific direction through the use of the imagination, imagining that they were going to stimulate their Kundalini fire. And no matter whether they had that information right or not as it applied to them, stimulation of the Kundalini through direct visualization is an incredibly dangerous thing to do because it's a natural process. It will naturally arise, and forcing it through meditation and visualization process. Also, breathing exercises in some schools are given to stimulate the Kundalini. Totally not desirable. He's spent many pages so far in this book talking about, warning us, about a premature rising of the Kundalini. Okay. Next up, can we get a reader?
Michelle, do you want to read?
Sure. 1. The pranic triangle. A, the shoulder center. B, the center near the diaphragm. C, the spleen. 2, man controlled from the astral plane. A, the base of the spine. B, the solar plexus. C, the heart. 3, man controlled from the mental plane. A, the base of the spine. B, the heart. C, the throat.
Thank you. Okay, the first triangle functions for all who are in incarnation, irrespective of their level of attainment. It blends with the fires at the base of the spine as evolution proceeds. DK says the process of assimilation is carried on in this triangle, and the prana which enters into either center circulates 3 times around the triangle before being transmitted to all parts of the etheric vehicle and from thence to the dense physical body. The main organ of assimilation is the spleen, the etheric center, and the dense physical organ. Next, man controlled from the astral plane. So what he's listing here is a triangle of centers that circulate the fire as based on the level of attainment of that person, right? So at this level of attainment, which is, astrally polarized man, you have these 3 centers. This listing may seem puzzling at first. I mean, how can the heart center be active in one who is controlled from the astral plane and who is thus emotionally polarized? There's a very useful stage-by-stage description in Letters on Occult Meditation that describes each level of consciousness in relation to the centers. DK starts the list with period 1, when the base of the spine is the most active in the purely rotary sense and not in a 4th dimensional. The inner fire is focused on the vivifications of the organs of generation and on the functional physical life of the personality. So, that relates somewhat to this stage, except for this stage continues as long as someone is in incarnation, whereas what he's describing here is a specific period in the unfoldment of a human's consciousness. Yes, Nisa?
You said that's in Letters on Occult Meditation. You've got it, Treatise on Cosmic.
Yeah. Let's see if I continue with that. Let me
FYI.
hang on a second. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, here it is. Oh, come on. Where'd you go? Yeah. So if you want a page number, it's on page 74 of Letters on Occult Meditation. Gee, here I thought it was perfect. So that's what should be here. I even got the page number right. I didn't take out the TCF. So now it's going crazy. All right. Hang on a sec. There we go. Thank you, Nisa. Yeah, Scott.
Yeah, actually, these periods, which you probably know, are just upcoming now in TCF. On page 174 of TCF, he talks about period 1, as well as
No kidding.
2 and the 3rd. So it's interesting.
That is interesting. Oh.
Anyway, so it's just
Tempted to pull out the book and look. I wonder if LOM is a repeat. Is it written in exactly the same?
I don't
Just
believe.
as this is written.
No, I don't believe so. No.
No. Okay. All right. Well, we'll go with the LOM. It's
different.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Okay. So this period, as I said, is related to this period that's described as the pranic triangle. But the pranic, as I mentioned before, the pranic triangle continues. Anytime you're in incarnation, this is going on. This energy triangle is happening, no matter what other levels are also active, right? Whereas this period is the earliest period in the evolution of a human being. Okay. So next where am I? Boy, I'm just all mixed up. 2, man controlled from the astral plane. the base of the spine, solar plexus. All right. So this, sorry. So the stage has been set by the period 1 description. Moving on, both the second and third periods seem to relate to the stage described in the text as man controlled by the astral plane, right? There's something of each in this. Could we get a reader just for the right-hand side of the page here?
Scott, do you want to read?
Period 2, wherein the solar plexus is the goal of the attention of the fire, and when the emotional counterpart vibrates synchronously. Two centers are thus vibrating, even though the measure be slow. The others are alive. Pulsation can be seen, but there is no circular movement. Period 3, the divine fire now mounts to the heart center, and the three rotate in ordered, measured unison. I would point out that the vivification of any one center causes an accession of force in all. And I would further point out that in the head are 7 centers, 3 major and 4 minor, and that these centers directly correspond to one or other center in the body. They are the synthesis, and on the stimulation of their corresponding center, receive themselves a corresponding acquisition of rotary power.
Thank you. Okay, next. 3, man controlled from the mental plane. A, the base of the spine. B, the heart. C, the throat. So this represents a triangle of circulation for someone controlled on the mental plane. So the first 2 centers are as before. Base of the spine anchors the physical material form, and the heart center anchors the life principle. Remember the Sutratma, which is anchored in the heart. But now the throat, radiating the fires of manas, replaces the emotionally oriented solar plexus. DK says, simply, the throat center synthesizes the entire personality life and is definitely connected with the mental plane. So we might derive from this that someone who is at this level is beginning to synthesize their personality or integrate their personality. Next, the list continues. Could we get a reader, please?
Yeah, do you want to read?
Sure. 4, man partially controlled by the ego, advanced man. A, the heart, B, the throat, and C, the head, that is the 4 lesser centers and their synthesis, the Alta center. 5, spiritual man to the 3rd initiation. A, the heart, B, the throat, and C, the 7 head centers. 6, spiritual man to the 5th initiation. A, the heart, B, the 7 head centers, and C, the 2 many-petaled lotuses.
Thank you, Tia. So first, 4, man partially controlled by the ego, advanced man. A, the heart, B, the throat, C, the head. That is the 4 lesser centers and their synthesis, the Alta center. It's difficult to say whether the heart and throat here represent the stage where the energy of the sacral center has been transferred to the throat and the solar plexus has been transferred to the heart. For the heart still represents the vital body, and the throat an increased level of monastic radiation, which has in turn activated the 4 lesser centers associated with the Alta Major. MDR says the Alta Major center is a synthetic center for the Brahmic aspect, the Alta Major is related to Saturn, and thus to past karma. Brahma is fivefold, and we have correspondingly 4 lesser centers, blended with the Alta Major center, making 5. Since the head and base of the spine are closely related, this 5-fold head center takes the place of the center at the base of the spine during this stage. Okay. Period 4 in Letters on Occult Meditation seems to relate to both man control from the mental plane and the next stage, man partially controlled by the ego / advanced man. Could we get a reader for this, please? Just the part on the right.
Tom, do you want to read?
Period 4 marks the definite stimulation of the throat center. All the creative activity of the threefold man, physical, emotional, and mental, is turned upward in service, and his life begins occultly to sound. He is occultly productive. He manifests forth, and his sound goes out before him. This is an occult statement of fact, definitely apparent to those who have the inner vision. Coordination between the centers becomes apparent. Rotation is intensified, and the centers themselves change in appearance, becoming unfolded, and the rotary movement becomes fourth-dimensional, turning inward upon itself. The centers are then radiating nuclei of light, and the corresponding 4 lower head centers are equally alive.
Okay. Any thoughts about this? I think by this time, there's no question that that there's been a transference of the sacral to the throat and the solar plexus to the heart. So next we have spiritual man to the 3rd initiation, the heart, the throat, the 7 head centers. This period includes the first 2 initiations, during which time the energy of the sacral center is transferred to the throat and the solar plexus center is transferred to the heart. So whether it happens during this phase or in the latter part of the previous phase, DK is not telling us. But concerning the first of these initiations, DK says, the first initiation, therefore, closely related to this problem. The 7th ray governs the sacral center and the sublimation of its energy into the throat or into the higher creative center. In light of the soul, we learn that an active head center is necessary for this dual transference. So could we get a reader for this, please?
And Veronica, you want to read?
It should be remembered also that all these centers have their correspondences in the etheric matter found in the region of the head, and that it is when these 7 head centers are awakened that their counterparts are also safely awakened. From the point of power in the head, the yogi directs all his affairs and undertakings, throwing upon all events, circumstances, and problems the awakened inner light. In this, he is guided by the love, insight, and wisdom which is his through the transmutation of his love nature, the awakening of his heart center, and the transference of the fires of the solar plexus to the heart.
Thank you, Anne Veronica. Letters on Occult Meditation tells us, quote, before initiation, all the centers will be rotating in 4th dimensional order. But after initiation, they become flaming wheels and seen clairvoyantly or of rare beauty. The fire of Kundalini is then awakened and is progressing in the necessary spirals. At the second initiation, the emotional centers are similarly awakened. And at the third initiation, those on the mental plane are touched. The initiate can then stand in the presence of the great king, the one initiator. This passage indicates a progression, not only from lower to higher centers in the etheric body, but also a progression from one body or sheath to the next. And that's where we'll have to draw the line today, folks.